All right. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
You know me, Gabby, but my name is Hannah for people watching.
Hi, I'm Jenna. So this is the first interview that we are going to be conducting with an aim to educate more on the field of music therapy. So today we have, you want to introduce?
We can start with you, Gabby, if you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself and where you work, what's your current title, things like that. Just a little bit.
Yes, you see, it's Gabriela. I go by Gabby. Just added my pronouns, she, her, and ella. I am a Latina music therapist. I work in New York City at a major hospital. It's a pediatric hospital. It's called New York Presbyterian Hospital. And Hannah actually was a intern of mine a few years back now. I'm kind of like a purebred in that I did my undergrad in music therapy, my master's in music therapy, and now my PhD in music therapy. I have about 15 years experience as a clinician. I have the same amount of experience working as a supervisor. And I also teach here and there. I'd like to sort of emphasize that my work is very much based in culturally reflexive and anti-oppressive practice within the larger healthcare system.
Love it. Love the introduction. Our questions kind of go chronologically, starting at the beginning of a music therapy career and going throughout. So how did you find out about music therapy originally, and what was your process kind of like exploring the field initially when in terms of looking for colleges and undergrad, things like that?
Sure. So I knew I wanted to do something music related. I have been a musician since I'm 5 years old and very active, like in extracurriculars or surrounding music and the arts. But I knew I didn't want to be an educator, even though I have sort of fallen in the education realm, but not like I think what I was considering was like being a piano teacher or being like a band instructor or like a choral director. That didn't really resonate for me, despite having a lot of interest and like enjoyment in that area of practice. I also feel like I saw a lot of burnout from some of my instructors, like in high school and middle school. And I thought, that's really not for me. So I honestly, I just went online and I was like, what's out there? And looking, I saw music therapy and my band director at the time had said, oh, I know a music therapist. That's actually a great career. And it wasn't even a question. I was like, oh, that feels like I didn't even know what it was. But what I thought it was, I was like, that resonates. Like whatever that idea is music is therapy, like I'm in. And so I just like started applying and looking online. I looked at what was local, which was Montclair State University. And then I also was like, I had such an independent spirit. I really wanted to go as like far away from home as possible. So then I also started just like looking at maps and seeing like what other schools were out there. And I also really wanted to go, I wanted to have a different experience. I grew up in New York City area and did a lot of like playing in subways and had a very like I guess rich experience in the city. I actually was like, it might be fun to go to like somewhere super rural. So I found the school on a map. It no longer has music therapy, but Mansfield University. And it was like so green on the map. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. I auditioned and, applied and got in. And then it was like a huge culture shock being like a place, like they had like one stoplight. And like, it was like the totally opposite. There was like only like 4 Latin people or Hispanic people on campus. So it was very different.
A lot different than New York City, I would say.
Yeah, totally.
What did you like about your college experience?
So this is going to sound really strange, but I didn't have a very good education experience in the sense that it was so rural. I never was supervised by a music therapist. So all of my practicum placements were without any guidance or even like modeling of the work. So what I think worked really well was that we didn't have, like, I know I think folks there's a lot of ethical concerns around that. But at the same time, I think it gave me a lot of really amazing experience in terms of like learning how to just like figure it out on my own, and also figure out what works and how, yeah, like how to kind of like hone in on my skills without like I wasn't like immediately imitating somebody or trying to like, I think that gets in a lot of people's way. Like a lot of students, it's like what it's supposed to be, or like what you're guided by like a supervisor, and you like started by first like trying to like be like the super. I never had that, so I really like, I feel like developed my own like identity and like figured out what worked for me. So I really did. I did like that. And I didn't know anything otherwise until I left. And then I was like, wait a minute, what? Like, oh, that's how it's supposed to be. And it closed down. And I think part of it was that there were some challenges around like the retention of students, but also like the program, I don't think was actually like meeting the standards of what it needed to have to be like up and running.
I feel like that's a pretty unique experience, I feel like, that you had in undergrad then.
Yeah, you just had to like make it work and figure it out.
Yeah. Do you feel like that kind of played into how you like practice now? Or as I guess as you developed throughout?
I think it has influenced me in the sense that I had to be super resourceful. I had to also be very spontaneous in terms of like navigating things, that I think that it really honed that skill to like that ability to be like quick in terms of problem solving and thinking. And I think that I mean, you know how I practice, it's very like in the moment, very relational, and also just very like I go with what's happening. And I think that was something I cultivated earlier on than I would have if I had that more formal training, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking of when you said that, of just like the improvisational nature of how you tend to work.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's why I gravitate towards that improvisational work just in general, because of that experience.
Right. And that's so important, I think, within the field of music therapy, just to have that skill set and to be able to use that in the moment when you're working with clients. So moving away from undergrad a little bit into internship, because that's the next step in a young music therapist's life. What was that like for you, applying to internships, where you got to go, the experiences that you had there?
So I have to actually, there's something I have to share that happened to me before internship. I actually was thinking of leaving the field in changing careers in my undergrad at some point, because I was like, I'm not sure. I didn't really have a good enough grasp on what like music therapy was. And I felt like, oh shoot, I'm about to go out and do this. Like midway, I was already like, at that time when I was like trying to figure out like, what am I doing? Like, what does this even mean? Like, how do I practice this? That I decided to go to a Mid-Atlantic regional conference, and I attended a presentation that was done by Rick Shashinsky, who was a Northrop Robbins guy. And I was like, it opened my world to like what improvisational music centered work was all about. And so when I looked for internship, I was like, I need to find a place that engages in like creative music therapy, Northrop Robbins, improvisation. And at the time, when I was looking at the AMTA roster, because that's how my school found places, it wasn't through like university affiliations, it was through the AMTA roster. I found two places. It was Donna Poland's place that was at the Finger Lakes DDSO, and the other one was with Conyo Loretto. Oh gosh, the name is escaping me, but it was another place, the Center for Discovery. And so yeah, so I knew, I'm like, I need to work in this way. Like there's no, that is my path. Like that, and I'm a bit intense when I like have a passion or interest. And actually Donna Poland, who I ended up selecting in that place, said, and I can't believe this. I actually don't quite have memory of this experience, but she said that I had told her during like my tour and interview with her, like, you need to take me. Like I need to be here and like you need to say yes. Like something like super aggressive like that. And I was like, oh my God. And part I'm like, okay, I am a little aggressive and like, but like I don't remember that. But she's like, and so I couldn't say no. She said I had to say yes because the way you were like, interacting with me. And I knew like, yeah, I already knew like that was something that really resonated with me and that I needed to hone in on and learn. And she's just fabulous. Like her whole conception of the work, the humanism and that setting was so amazing. So I don't know if if you want me to get into it, but yeah, I kind of knew right away. It didn't even matter like the demographic or the people that was being served. I knew that I wanted to work in a particular style.
Yeah.
And that's what I went toward.
I feel like that's unique too. I don't feel like I often meet a lot of people who know the style immediately.
Right.
They know like where or who with, but not how necessarily.
Yeah. Well, the potentials of what like music-centered music therapy could offer someone was just, I was just so blown away by.
Yeah.
And that's what I was more drawn towards. I didn't care like whom I was serving. Yeah, and you're right. A lot of people think very concretely about like the type of setting. Like you came to a hospital,
Yeah.
and that's right. Like, and there are people that, yeah, like I want to work in pediatrics. I'm like, I just know I want to work. I want to learn how to like practice in this way, this philosophy, and this like theoretical sort of orientation.
That's interesting. Do you feel like that's changed now?
I think I'm more integrative, where it's not just music centered philosophy. Like, and I actually like, I think my emphasis is really like cultural, relational, anti-oppressive right now, but it's very much integrated with understandings of music centered philosophy. I think a lot about ecology and like, relational humanism, like resource oriented. I think it's like this big pot that I've been able to accumulate through the years that now are more integrative in that approach. But I always think I process the work thinking about music still very deeply. Like it, yeah, and the potentials that music has to create that change.
What do you think were your biggest learning points, your biggest takeaways during that time in your internship?
One of the things, and because it was so specific to that music-centered, like Northrop Robbins approach, is that one of the big things was like learning how to trust your own music. And like working against like the imposter syndrome and things like that. I also played like way too much. I used to think like, and I think that's part of my personality. And I think it's easier. I think it was easier for Donna to work with me in terms of bringing down and like really being more specific about things. I used to just like play and like just like fill the space with so much musicking and I think the use of silence was something I really need to learn about and how to really like think with precision around what I was doing. I also think a big takeaway that was like really the person-centered perspective that I learned there. Like part of the documentation was like figuring out what are these individuals' needs. And when we were writing plans, Donna was very much about writing from the perspective of what they want. So, when you learn things in school, you learn things like so and so, the goals and objectives, so and so will do this, right? like will increase, like maybe the larger goal is like increasing attention, right? For thinking from a behavioral perspective, or that's not necessarily behavioral, but thinking in that realm. And then it'd be like, so and so will. And we wouldn't write like that. The notes would be like, Eric, just to name, wants to. And the goals were also so much more centered on like quality of life. And so it helped me to sort of think less about, I guess, more broadly around like the human experience and the human condition, which is very much in line with Northrop Robbins. And like, what is it that we seek as humans? And what is it that we want? And how do we verify this with the people that we're working with? Because oftentimes the communities that we serve there were non-speaking. And so it would, it really opened me up to think like existentially, humanistically. And that was like a big learning that I had to make, because at school the orientation was much more behavioral and not really thinking about, I guess, quality of life as like something of importance.
So kind of related to that in terms of behavioralism and humanistic perspectives, etc., with the exam after internship. Was that something you did right away? I know it's a little different because you obviously went through more programs and licensure in New York, which we can get to. But in terms of the CBMT and taking the exam, what was kind of your experience with that specifically?
I did it right away. I actually extended my internship longer because I felt like I wanted to eat up like everything I could. And I was like, can I stay longer with you? And she was so gracious to let me stay longer. And I think my rent, like my lease it was a little bit longer anyway, so it worked out well. I did the CBMT exam right away. It felt like it was like I was going backwards. I felt like I had opened up my mind to really thinking about things much more humanistically, and the exam felt so behavioral and like so specific. And so I don't know, I remember being like, I don't know if I'm going to pass this. I remember feeling like I couldn't answer some of the questions, but I passed. I did pass.
Yay.
You get your answer like right away, whether you pass or fail. And I remember just feeling like this is really like it just didn't feel grounded in the real world. Some of the things, and I understood some of the theory questions that they wanted you to know, and but then some of the scenarios, like I remember feeling like, oh, it could be this or this, and then I was like, all right, I'm giving it up to chance. Like, here we go, just fill in A. It was costly. I remember it just feeling a lot of pressure to pass it on the first go.
Yeah, which I know is something that I'm not sure in terms of universities how people educate around this now, but I know like my experience, I don't know if Jenna, if yours was the same, it was sort of commonplace to not pass on your first time. And I had a lot of people in my cohort who it did take a few times to pass, simply sometimes because it was more about knowing how to take the test versus knowing the content that was going to be on the test.
Right. Yeah, that's a big part of it.
And I think a big part of it as well is that pressure of feeling like you have to pass it on the first go.
Yeah.
And I don't know, for me, it felt like much more independent than maybe other exams that I took like with my cohort, because we were all preparing together. With that one, independent, like you're really going into it alone. And then
and when I think about it, it doesn't really test what it like puts everything into a written boxed, like, multiple choice question. It's not actually asking you ever to like show your skill sets like as a therapist. So CBMT, if you're out there must be a better way to actually like really examine this on someone. And I think this goes with like probably this relates to a lot of other professions, like right? Like in terms of like counseling and psychology, but even more so, I think for us, like it's not, I don't know. It's a, yeah, we need to look at that.
I don't feel like it's relational. It doesn't
Right.
it doesn't test your skills to be a human and to talk to someone and to interact.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it would be nice if we had like a screen, like, you know, where then like it would talk about scenario and you like kind of show it. And then there's,
I
I
also
don't know,
feel
but
like a lot of I can speak for me, but also the nerves that I would feel about, let's say, conducting an assessment or conducting a session would immediately be decreased as soon as I started engaging in conversation with the person. As soon as I was in it, my independence, my ability to be confident in what I was doing would increase drastically versus 5 minutes before. So that type of progress or that type of transition wouldn't show in an online test.
yeah. Yeah. And even in terms of like accessibility, right? Like we understand, I think, now more than ever that like these standardized exams aren't like appropriate for everyone. So
Yeah.
also like there's not options for this.
Mhm.
That really should be something, especially in the area that we're working in. Like there should be more considerations for that.
Yeah.
So how did you find yourself, like best practices for studying, for preparing for that exam? Was it taking those practice tests? Was it study groups that you were part of? What was it that helped you prepare for that exam?
Yeah, I took that exam once and got a lot of answers wrong, and I was like, I'm not doing that again. I, you know, part of the work with Donna was learning how to trust myself, like trust the music. And part of that too, what I ended up like transferring that philosophy into this and was like, look, you know what you know. Like there's no cramming. Like, and if I don't pass something, it will tell me where I didn't pass it. And then I'll go and study like the areas where I need to improve upon. So I kind of took the philosophy of like, you learned all you needed to learn. And obviously I did a lot of catch up with Donna on like music therapy stuff because there's a lot of things that I didn't learn that I suddenly was coming into during internship, but I felt like I had gotten a very well-rounded experience in internship and really learned, especially like based on the competencies and things like that, like where the skills that I needed that yeah, I didn't go wild like taking practice test after practice test. That doesn't work for me. And
Yeah.
that doesn't and didn't at the time.
Yeah. Well, you know yourself then.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in terms of grad school, did you go right away or did you have some working experience before then?
Yeah, I had some working experience. I worked like I think like 4 or 5 years as a music therapist and then sought out grad school. In particular because I felt like I really wanted to learn in New York City, the LCAT, the licensed creative arts therapist, allows you to practice psychotherapy. And I felt like I really wanted to develop those skill sets that I was like, I think it's time. There were a lot of cases that were coming up for me that, yeah, I could only go so far with that. I thought, okay, I think this is a good time. And then started looking at places. I was still working in like a very improvisational way. I was looking for places that would hone that. So I was thinking NYU or Malloy, and then ended up going with Malloy, yeah, to develop that, and then got the Northrop Robin certification while I was there too. So I was kind of like really had a very clean track up until that point in terms of like my direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about what the LCAT is, what that means for New York, and how that might be different than other states?
Yeah. So the LCAT is a licensure that is issued by the New York State Office of Professions. And it is a licensure, it's an umbrella term that covers music therapists, art therapists, dance movement therapists, drama therapists, poetry therapists, and psychodrama therapists. So it covers a whole slew of professions under that. And the licensure allows us, it's a requirement, you have to be a master's level individual within one of those disciplines. And it allows us to practice psychotherapy. And the schools have to be, like any music therapy school in New York has to meet the education requirements for the licensure. And so once you obtain that licensure, you actually have to do additional hours, both supervision and what they call direct client contact hours. And you're issued a limited permit at that time once you are able to get a supervisor. And those additional hours, once you complete all that, you're then eligible for the actual license, and it requires you to update it similar to the CBMT, but it's separate. It's CEUs that have different, I guess, requirements. I think at CBMT, it's 100 hours, right?
Yeah.
And for us, it's 30 credits for every 3 years. And so there are different courses that we could take, or continuing education opportunities that one could take. It does give you that capacity to engage in psychotherapy, and then also allows you the opportunity to bill for services in particular settings, like private practice or even like outpatient settings.
Is there opportunity for what they call double dipping between the continued education credits that you might be using towards your CBMT recertification and those CEUs, or do you feel like they're very separate?
They're very separate in the sense that your CEUs have to come from an LCAT approved provider for the licensure. So like a CBMT credit would not qualify as a credit for LCAT because it's a different, like a conference, for instance, like at, I'm from the Mid-Atlantic region. They offer you LCAT credits separately and then CBMT credits separately. And you have to get 2 separate forms that verify those credits. Sometimes like the fortunate thing with Mid-Atlantic is that they will offer you both.
Yeah.
And so you can get both of them, but you might go someplace that only offers you CBMT credits. CBMT is a little bit easier, I think, in the sense that it's a little bit broader in terms of the types of things and options that you have to qualify as credits for continuing education.
What do you feel like is beneficial for you in terms of continuing education? Like what has made the most impact on you? I know you've done some additional trainings as well. So
I guess the hands-on education, I would still qualify that as maybe not school, but education. I get things from going to presentations. I won't deny that, but I feel like I get more in terms of and I think that's why I continue my schooling, is that I get a lot in being a student. I get a lot in being a student of vocal psychotherapy, which I also have a training in the Northrop Robbins. I really like to immerse myself in more specified trainings, prolonged trainings. I think that really works well for me. One-off things don't always work for me. I need more time to integrate content and material. And I do attend workshops where it's really mind-blowing and it really opens me up to things. But I think in terms of a learner, I know I benefit more from more prolonged trainings.
Is that how you decided to pursue a doctoral degree as well?
Yeah, I felt like I needed other skill sets that I didn't have, and the PhD, what it afforded me was much more learning and understandings on research. because at the time I was working in a research capacity. I'd gotten a job at Mount Sinai Kravis Children's Hospital, and I was a creative arts therapy coordinator, specifically working on research. And I felt the limitations that I had in terms of like being able to design and really conceptualize research studies. I did my first one in collaboration with a group of people, but I felt my limitations. So I was like, I need these skill sets. And that's what prompted me to be like, yeah, let's do this. Let's get this PhD now so that I can actually maybe in tandem while serving as a researcher, practice and get the supports that I need to do this work.
Yeah. And how did you decide where you wanted to do the PhD?
I mean, Temple has such a legacy, a longstanding legacy. It's the first PhD program. And I knew a lot of people who graduated from Temple that I greatly admired. I also wanted to remain in New York City, and it was a program that afforded me distance learning. And I also was very much interested in Drexel at the time, but Drexel didn't have an opportunity for you to not do it part-time. They were looking for like full-time people, and also required you to move to really at least near Philly. And I thought that wasn't feasible for me at the time. So, and once I met with the faculty, I applied, because you could always apply and then decide you don't want to do something, whether it's a job or whether it's like applying for school, right? You can always deny it. Like if you're somewhat relatively curious and like I am really leaning towards this, like I always think it's worth applying for, at least going through the process, and then you realize in that process like whether you really truly want to go through it or not. So yeah, and talking with the faculty, and they were like, what are your research interests? And I'm like, I'm interested in this, but I don't really know how to do this. And I just felt there was like just very warm and welcoming, and that is like that's really important to me. And I felt like a Temple, even from afar, was such a community. And I was like, oh, I want to feel like in community, in communitas with people. Like, so that was what also, moved me a bit closer to Temple.
So with that, I would love to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about your thesis. And not your thesis. What's the word?
Yeah, you can call it in Spanish, it's thesis. So yeah, that works. Dissertation.
Okay. Dissertation. That's what I was thinking of. And about how you kind of came to that, how it's going, what the process is like for you.
Yeah, so it was, it took on many evolutions and iterations. I'll tell you how I got there, and I'll start out like what I was first interested in was this idea of self-disclosure. But self-disclosure, particularly with Latine, and I use Latine, which is a gender-neutral term that that kind of like goes against the binary Latino, Latina that is in the language, to just be more gender inclusive. And so I was really fascinated in my work here in the hospital that I found that and I still do, I engage in much more self-disclosure with Latine individuals. And I found that like there are certain things about, and it was particular to me, I understand that. So I'm not speaking broadly, but I'm speaking really in relation to my experience, that the work also involved more like what we call in Spanish, like small plática, like more like small talk, things that just were like very different than the way in which I would work with other folks that were not Latine. And I really was curious to understand this. And so I was initially interested in looking at this and seeing like, hey, does my being a Latina really influence this? And really it was just too broad, and it was just too much based on me, and it wasn't like really generalizable. So like I don't really know what benefit. And when you think about research, like it shouldn't be, you have to really think about like what benefit would this have towards society or people, or like, right, that's why we do what we do, so that we can like move things forward and bring in new knowledge. I thought like, this is just about me, and it's not, I don't know what use this will be for anybody outside of myself, right? Like a self-awareness project, if anything. And so I was really interested then, and that was like, okay, off the table. I'm not doing that. And I was wondering, I was like, in that process, one of the big questions that kept coming up for me, is it because of my identities as a Latina? Or is it, and I remember Dr. Darlene Brooks was like, or is it because you're just such a chatty person and you're like warm and you're like engaging? Like, what about these qualities of like, and maybe that's something we begin to explore. So I started thinking more broadly, and this was not an isolation. I'm speaking like me, but it really was in collaboration with Dr. Brooks in terms of really thinking about this. And we started thinking more broadly about therapeutic relationships. And what is it that like, yeah, like what are the qualities that an individual who's seeking music therapy wants from their therapist? And I wanted to stay really grounded in working with the Latine community, because we don't have enough literature or research that's inclusive of their voices. And I kept saying, like, I really want this to be liberatory and really like, and the question was at first, like, is this emancipatory? Like, and I moved away from that. I really stay more in this realm of liberation, but like, how can we like elevate these voices around like their needs and interests and desires in music therapy? It wasn't even just about the therapist. We started thinking like just in general. And then, and in particular, since I work in the healthcare setting, like in the hospital, like what are their needs, interests for music therapy in the hospital, and like how, and so I started thinking much more about really examining more critically the sort of the underbelly things, like how do like contextual factors like economics and politics and power play out, and how do we navigate these things? So the study moved to eventually to what it is now. It's a critical autoethnography. And it's critical in the sense that it's really looking at those underbelly things. It's really looking at things from a critical race and a Latine critical race perspective. But also it's the autoethnography, the auto is me, because really it's also, I can't separate myself from this. Like part of the auto piece is really like also exploring my relationship to this. And the ethnography is really about being a member of this community and engaging in ethnographic interviews with, so who will be interviewed are the music therapists and the Latine recipients of care that they work with. So it's going to be really exploring all of these questions and really examining, so that we can, one, elevate their voices and hear their needs and interests, to use this idea of testimonio, which is like testimony, which is part of like these liberatory practices, like in social justice. And it's really rooted in what we do, like storytelling, which is very much a part of our cultures. And it's really critical in that I'm really looking at things using this type of analysis that will like look at things from the micro to the macro, in terms of like really looking at the systems in which we are found, and the constraints and the limitations that it places, not only on the individuals, like the recipients of care, but also the music therapists and where they are located. So it has yet to start off. I'm still in the IRB phase of it, and making I just resubmitted like my edits for it, but hopefully kicking it off this summer.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Soon.
Yeah.
Are you excited for that?
I really am. There's a little bit of fear that I have. like the vulnerability with which this research, like that there's a method that I'm using. It's like a crystallization method, and it's a method to ensure like trustworthiness and credibility. And with a crystal, when you look at it, there's this prism and you see all sides of the crystal. And really it's calling me to be super reflexive and also like open. And I don't know, there's a level of vulnerability that I'm excited like to really explore, but also nervous to really get into that.
Yeah, it
And
seems
bear it all,
yeah, it seems very personal. It's not just about the work you do, but also about you.
Yeah. Yeah, because I am a music therapist. I am a Latina within the communities of, Latin folks. And yeah, and also like there's so many intersectional identities that I have that relate to this that yeah, I think we'll need to have like a level of vulnerability with the research.
Yeah. That kind of being said, in terms of bringing it back to the field of music therapy, where do you kind of hope or envision or think that the field of music therapy is going to in the future develop, the areas in which you hope that it develops, or you think is kind of currently in the works for now?
Well, I think, and that's a very like radical imaginary question that you're asking, which is really wonderful because we have to start by like really using our imagination to really, it's like, right, like the father of radical imagination was Martin Luther King. And yet we still have so much work to do in that area, right? Like, yes, there was progress to be made, but there's still so much work, as we know, given like everything that's been going on, like to do. And I think that in that same vein, like, yes, we are starting the conversations on cultural reflexivity, but we still have so much more to do on that front. We have so much more to do in terms of liberating and like dismantling structures that have been in existence. I mean, it is my hope that we really, develop a much more critically conscious profession, one that, elevates and, incorporates challenges like the status quo and brings in, those silent perspectives that have not been introduced. So I think there's a lot more that I hope for. And I think that's part of what I've been interested in and what I do all the time are these like lectures on that, because we need to like have more investment in that.
Yeah. I know you just mentioned the lectures there. What, for those people who are watching and would like to contract your services for that, what's your specialty there? Like, what do you lecture on, and where can they sort of find you?
Yeah, so I mean, I think if you Google my name, Gabriela Asch Ortiz, you can find my contact information. Like, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook. I'm also I have a website with my current job that has my contact information too. I do a lot of things. I center a lot of things on cultural identities and understanding like the nuances that are related to that, because we really have to start with ourselves. I look a lot at like the oppressive systems and ways in which we can challenge those things, actually help people to like understand the systems and our relationships to them, because we are all like so complicit. And also, like, I'm not saying that I'm better than, I'm also a learner in this process, but like learning systems of capitalism and patriarchy, and that exist, and what is our relationship to them, so that we can think with more consciousness. I look a lot at power and privilege and how that plays out. And the move that I do is towards like critical consciousness. And I'm a learner in the process too. So it's not like I'm no expert in this by any means, but I enjoy the dialogue and engaging with and calling in people to consider those things in their practice and supervision, teaching.
Yeah. Well, I can say, I guess from personal experience, I think you are a good resource for that.
Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of folks out there. It's not just me. There's Jasmine Edwards, who I present with fairly regularly, Kate Myers-Kaufman, Stephanie Sofield, Mingyuan Lau, my husband, Jesse Asch Ortiz, Marisol Norris, Natasha Thomas, like, et cetera, that, you can learn from. You can learn a whole lot from. Sue Hadley, like, oh gosh, so many people out there. So there are folks out there, and a lot of people offer consulting. So, if you're in a person who, or even just want direct supervision, like I go to supervision outside. I don't have any supervisor here, but I have supervision with Sue Hadley. We see each other on a weekly to navigate things, and a lot of our discussions are based on these topics. So if you're looking at on an individual level, or even just like for your organization, like, we're out there doing those things on all those levels. So just reach out.
Well, I know we are running short on time here, so I want to thank you for doing this with us and for educating on all the experiences you've been a part of and all the great work you're doing. And I'm excited to read it and see it.
Cool. Me too. All right. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you, Gabby.
Bye.